We live in a time when the word transformation is everywhere. It appears in conversations about the future of our communities, our institutions, our planet, and even ourselves. And while transformation is often offered as a promise, it can also feel like a demand. Something urgent, weighty, and overwhelming. When the world already feels fragile and people are tired, even hopeful words can begin to feel like too much to carry. So this morning, I would like to invite a different way of thinking about change. Instead of imagining transformation as something we must force or achieve, what if we explored it as something that emerges, something that begins quietly, gently, and often unnoticed? What if transformation doesn't always announce itself with disruption, but arrives through patience and joy? As we explore transforming possibilities together this morning, I invite us to listen to softer invitations, to notice where life is already stirring, and to consider how joy itself might be one of the most powerful agents of change we have. This sermon has developed over time and wasn't exactly the one that I thought I was going to write. But at our recent weekly worship meeting, and we do meet weekly, I asked what the members would like to hear more about in the future. And the answer was joy. Well, that tracks, I thought. What is more transforming and joyful than the arrival of spring, which just occurred? Those of us with daffodils are seeing either teases of yellow or full-blown blooms right now. Just this hint of spring, especially after the winter we've had, is bound to evoke a joyful response. And is there any season more transforming than spring? The worship committee responses offered a different direction to this week's sermon, especially after the lack of enthusiasm I received on the title. Why was I surprised that transforming possibilities didn't excite anyone who'd asked me the same question? What was I speaking on? I remembered an all-church mission building workshop I attended a few years back when our minister first arrived at First U. The young adults said they wanted to keep the focus differently from the concept of transformation that always comes up in discussions of the future. Transformation is just too heavy, they said. They shared something honest, that the word transformation can sometimes feel like a lot to carry. It can sound big, demanding, or exhausting, especially when we're tired. That memory and the worship committee's responses stayed with me. It made me wonder whether there are other ways to think about change that feel more gentle, more humane, and more hopeful. We live in a world that often urges us to be realistic about what we can change, realistic about how much hope we should allow ourselves. And yet this morning, the season itself seems to offer a quiet rebuttal. My weather forecast said rain. Spring arrives not with force or certainty, but with small, almost shy signs of possibility. The hint of yellow in the daffodils I spoke of, which were unnoticeable a few days ago. Light lingering just a little longer at day's end. life stirring where we thought nothing remained. These ordinary, hopeful moments invite us to wonder together about transformation, not as something heavy or demanding, but as something that unfolds gently when we make room for joy, imagination, and the possibility that what comes next may be different and perhaps better than what came before. And if spring really does teach us anything, it might be this: joy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the simple relief of what's coming back to us. So I want to name a few of the places where, if we are open to it, we will start seeing joy everywhere. There is joy in return, the light lingering a little longer each evening, the warmth slowly making its way back into the soil, the quiet reappearance of color after months of restraint. Spring reminds us that what looked dormant was never truly gone. It was waiting. There is joy in renewal. Buds swell on bare branches. Green pushes up through ground that seemed lifeless. Spring assures us that endings are not failures. They are often preparations. Even after a long, hard winter, literal or spiritual, new beginnings are still possible. There is joy in movement. Let's move, everyone. Let's just, there's joy. You feel that release. Oh. Windows open, feet wander outdoors again. Our bodies seem to remember something ancient as we breathe deeper, stretch farther, and feel the sun touch our skin. Spring invites us back into relationship with the living world. There is joy in possibility. Spring does not promise certainty, but it offers hope. Seeds are planted without guarantees. We trust the process anyway. The season teaches us that faith is often an act of participation rather than proof. There's joy in connection. Birds return and sing to one another with enticing mating calls. Communication among communities occur more easily. We notice our neighbors, the earth, and one another again. Let's take a moment and turn to anyone that's around you and just say, I notice you. Spring reminds us that life thrives in relationships, not isolation. And there's joy in permission. Permission to begin again, to imagine differently, to forgive what did not grow last season, and to risk hope once more that this year it will grow. Well, maybe if you fertilize the ground and do different things, it will. Spring does not erase what came before it. It grows out of it. And in that quiet truth lies one of its deepest joys, the assurance that life, again and again, chooses to return, to continue. The joys of spring are not just pleasant experiences. They are transforming possibilities made visible. Spring shows us transformation that is not forced or heavy, but organic, rhythmic, and trustworthy. What looked dormant was not defeated. What appeared finished was only waiting. Each bud, each lengthening day, each hint of yellow in the daffodils carries the same quiet message. Change does not always arrive through struggle. It often arrives through readiness. It often arrives through readiness. Spring transforms the landscape by inviting life to respond when conditions are right. And in so doing, it invites us to imagine our own transformations differently. Not as demands we place upon ourselves or the world, but as possibilities that emerge when we make room for light, warmth, patience, and care. In this way, spring teaches us that joy itself can be transformative. Not because it ignores what has been difficult, but because it grows out of it. Just as spring reminds us to believe that winter, as difficult as it might have been, and this last winter was as difficult as any I remember, winter never has the final word. So, does prophetic imagination refuse to believe that the present is the final word? A modern prophet, that's from prophetic, is an influential thinker, social commentator, or visionary who accurately analyzes present trends to help foresee future outcomes. The prophet is not only the one who names what is broken, but the one who insists on noticing where life is still rising. I think that you did a great job noticing where life is arising for social justice today in our community. Spring also offers us a way of thinking about what some call prophetic joy, the kind of joy that notices where life is still quietly emerging. This kind of joy doesn't rush or demand. It simply pays attention. It notices small signs of renewal and trusts what is emerging. And by the way, don't forget our next No Kings Saturday. I will be in Wilmington, but you'll be here. Please all show up. 2:00, please all show up. Prophetic imagination, then, is about refusing to believe that the present is the final word. It's about looking honestly at the world as it is and still daring to ask, what else may be possible here? Prophetic imagination always begins with truth-telling. It does not deny pain, injustice, or exhaustion. It does not look away from systems or habits that limit us. Instead, it names them clearly. Although we may know what it feels like to live with a quiet sense of resignation, to accept a strained relationship, a broken system, or a weary part of ourselves as just the way things are, we also know we cannot live like that permanently. Prophetic imagination gently disrupts the acceptance, which there isn't that much acceptance about some of the way things are right now. But not everybody marches. Not everybody is in action. You might not be able to march, but please be in action. Prophetic imagination gently disrupts whatever level of acceptance we have. It whispers or sometimes shouts, "This is not the only way." And those whispers and shouts matter because without imagination, change cannot begin. And I did think about sticking the meditation right here, but I didn't. And so you'll just have to take that with you and meditate on it all the time. Without imagination, change cannot begin. When we explore possibilities, we tap into something that I believe is sacred. The prophetic imagination invites us into new ways of being, both for self and for society. Much of my own understanding of what I've been describing comes from my personal experiences and the recognition I found in the work of James Luther Adams, a Unitarian Universalist theologian who believed deeply in the power of community. Adams reminded us that faith isn't something we live out alone. It takes shape in how we treat one another, how we organize our common life, and how we care for the world we share. Adams believed that democracy, at its core, is a moral practice, one that depends on participation, responsibility, and respect for every person. He trusted that ordinary people working together in small communities can make meaningful change. If that isn't something to be optimistic about, I don't know what is. That small communities like this one can make meaningful change. At the heart of Adams' philosophy is his belief that human beings are inescapably social creatures, and therefore religion must be understood in social terms. He rejected the idea that spirituality is only a personal piety or inward contemplation. He's not rejecting that, but it has to be balanced for what he argued was the true measure of faith, which is found in the institutions we create and sustain. This emphasis on institutions naturally led Adams to his celebrated claim that democracy is a religious commitment. Having witnessed the rise of Nazism during his time in Germany in the 1930s, Adams believed that democracy was not simply a political arrangement, but a moral project, requiring active participation, critical reflection, and a willingness to resist the forces of domination. No kings, please. He believed that liberal religion must cultivate the habits of mind and heart that sustain democratic life: openness, accountability, shared power, and a commitment to the dignity of every person. Adams also insisted that evil is real. He was convinced that liberal optimism must be tempered by a sober understanding of how institutions can be corrupted and how ordinary people can be drawn into destructive systems. For Adams, confronting evil required both moral clarity and organized resistance. Ultimately, James Luther Adams' philosophy calls for a religion that is courageous, socially engaged, and deeply committed to the flourishing of democratic life. And as members here already know, the fellowship and every UU congregation is organized on that principle of democracy in its space, in its churches, fellowships, gatherings. He challenges individuals and communities to recognize their power as co-creators of history. Now that's impressive, co-creators of history. And to use that power in the service of justice. Adams also understood that harm is real, not just in individual choices, but in the way systems can drift away from care and fairness. That can even occur in congregations, by the way. And so we always have to be attentive. Adams knew how easily power could overshadow compassion and how important it is to keep love and responsibility in balance. And I personally think that our new values that have placed love right in the center of all the other values is a sort of a flowering of Adams' theology. His work reminds us that meaningful change doesn't come from force alone, but from people choosing mutual care repeatedly and paying attention to emerging possibilities for life's growth. Adams brings this to simplicity. He speaks of a will to power and a will to mutuality. We need both and must not let the will to power overpower mutuality. So the creeping, almost imperceptible appearance of spring flora and belief that a religion's value is shown in the actions and hearts of its members do share a common thread. Both rely on hope that our actions will bear fruit for a better place, a better world. We can be inspired by the daffodils pushing up through the soil, millimeter by millimeter. Well, they've already done that mostly. We too can push through difficult times to release the brightness and joy of life. And I do acknowledge that you've already been doing that as well as the daffodils. Amen. Blessed be. Go in joy. Use joy as your buzzword for this whole spring and for your life, because in joy is found what we're looking for.